we are all learning and how to move on and how to keep industry strong, how to keep hope more importantly than everything else, and just hope that this hopefully this will be behind us soon. Although it's here to stay, but we have to, as an industry, change our ways and reinvent ourselves, reinvent the way we function, and take it from there to ensure that we suffer as many less job losses, everything else. Brands don't go out of business, and make sure that we have a positive future within the industry. So over the past 2 months, I've actually not really been in the most creative headspace. I've sort of spent my time, apart from doing a lot of things in the house which I otherwise wouldn't do. A lot of time I've spent more in terms of analyzing, reading a lot of the blogs, reading a lot of the reports that have been coming in. Both from the Business of Fashion writes an amazing blog, so it keeps you updated with what's new, what's happening, and what could happen, how the industry will move forward. Then they got together with McKinsey and did a very interesting report, which was called the State of Fashion 2020, and it talks about the various things that have, some of which have happened and some of which they are predicting is how the industry will pan out. Then Bain did a very, very interesting report specifically on luxury. So what I thought was, I know that you guys are not in the industry that way as yet, but hopefully all of you, for me, you guys are the future. So definitely you will be out there, and then, you will be taking this industry forward. So what I felt when I was asked what I would like to talk about was to give you a synopsis of uh, what's happening, what's predicted, and what all these reports are saying, and what people are talking about, so that you guys are fully aware of the how the industry's been impacted. Therefore, it will help you also realign some of your goals, some of your thoughts, both in terms of creative thoughts, marketing ideas, job opportunities, things you want to do in the future. A lot of them will have to have also be reinvented, because there will be new demands. There'll be, functioning will be different. For instance, fashion working from home is different. It's not like a banker working from home or a lawyer working from home who can do up-teen Zoom calls, but not to be in a studio, not to have, not to be able to cut yourself or to feel a fabric, for example. Everything's People are still developing, ideas and thoughts of how we're going to be able to do this. So basically, what I've done for you is I've divided the presentation into three parts, which is pretty much the instant impact of the lockdown and COVID. Then, what are the key learnings for us as an industry? And then, more importantly, the less gloomy parts of where I want to talk about the future and what it holds, and what are our what are our big takeaways in terms of things that we will need to do, we will need to adapt, and then reinvent the fashion industry.
Right.
One second.
Sorry, I keep getting disconnected for some reason. I've made you the host, Ashish. So if you want to upload your
The screen
presentation, yes, you
Yeah.
can do that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like I said, we're going to start with the first part, which is primarily how we've got impacted. So this, we all know that, we've all felt the anxiety.
Take it full screen, Ashish.
Yeah,
the
sure.
PPT. Yeah. Press that little thing at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, but oh yeah, I suppose that's fine. Yeah.
So all of us have been anxious. All of us have been gotten locked down. It's not just been in India; it's been across the world. As you know that most of the world has been locked down in various different ways. But at least for the first 30 days, it was all very similar to the way we were locked down. From restaurants, gyms, schools, stores, every industry, everything closed, and more importantly, closed indefinitely without knowing where we're going. So that in itself can be, it can take quite a lot of out of most people, because not knowing anything about the future and having so much uncertainty around us is disturbing. Then, for example, in terms of its impact specifically on the fashion industry, a lot of people are saying this is just the beginning, that we really have to figure out and change the way we were functioning. For instance, one of the biggest learnings that people are saying is that fashion was moving far too fast. There was too much consumption, too much of fashion out there. A lot of it was irrelevant. They were from seasons, things became drops. Drops became, in some cases, weekly. So it was just excessive. So a lot of experts are saying first thing we need to do is to slow fashion down. So in terms of survival instincts, how will dramatic shifts in the global economy and consumer behavior affect the post-corona world impact, and what can be done to rewire that system which is no longer working? So that's pretty much what I was discussing, that one of the first takeaways everybody is saying is that the system needs to be rewired. We need to look at it slightly differently now. A lot of the way we were, when I say we, I mean both the industry in India as well as the industry internationally, because till some time back, it was quite, the world was a small place. I'm not sure I can say that now, but at least 2 months ago it was. So a lot of things that were happening globally would impact us in a similar way. So of course, the impact of it has been unimaginable. Simply because remember that this industry is directly affected by global travel. People traveling around the world, NRIs coming to India, buying their, coming in. This was specifically a wedding season. A lot of people had orders. All those weddings have been called off. Orders have not been completed. People have not paid. Manufacturing has come to a standstill. So even, in the West, funnily enough, there was still some activity on the e-commerce front. In fact, some stores said that, some stores have even written to us saying that, do you guys have any ready stock which has sizes? Because whatever we had in terms of stock online, we've managed to sell it. So this was the situation in Europe, but in India, as you know, e-commerce was not even up and running. So of course, due to the lockdown, a lot of people have lost their jobs, both at senior levels as well as at lower positions. Specifically in India, when we discuss, I think it's more our karigars, our workers, our embroiderers, a lot of whom got scared, and that there's unfortunately, however skilled they are, there's still a large level of most of them are uneducated. Therefore, the scare of COVID, a lot of them have tried to go back home, or have gone back home, or wanting to go back home, with the result that so many people have not even when the industry opens up, one big concern all of us have is what about our trained artisans? What about our labor? Where do we get those people from? Because a lot of them have already left. So this is a statistic from the Bain report, which says that almost 80% of fashion players will be in distress due to the impact of COVID. This was completely new to most of us. fashion working from home. How does one make it work? So a lot of the brands, big companies, of course, we've kept in touch with some of our staff. We've kept in touch with the design team, but it's very little that we could do beyond that. Whereas a lot of the bigger companies, both in India and internationally, have still been interacting, been discussing the future. But the more important thing is that there's been this virtual culture, and all of us need to, figure out how fashion will survive within that culture. So another interesting statistic is that 60% of those people have experienced a negative impact on their personal productivity. 51% have reported a reduction in their workload, and the sort of more senior level executives within the fashion business have indicated that, or 33% of them have indicated that their companies plan for long layoffs of existing employees. Again, not very good news. So basically, everyone is having to rethink. For instance, one very interesting thing I came over, which I wanted to talk about here, was for the first time in the history, Vanity Fair in Italy put one of their doctors on the cover of the magazine instead of a movie star or a big fashion designer or a big model, because truly, these are our new heroes. We've got to even respect that. And so this thing went viral. People have been talking about it. So I just put it in there as something that happened that you should be aware of. One immediate concern that from at any level, whether it was a designer level, luxury, or high street, is nobody's being able to understand what we're going to do with massive inventory, because March traditionally is the period where spring summer lines go into stores across the world. So productions were either delivered, boxes were ready, or shipments were shipped, not paid, some of them not paid for. Now all those goods are lying in warehouses across the world, and nobody really knows how they're going to sell, when they're going to sell, what's going to happen to them. So one of the biggest concerns, the current concern that everyone has, is what are we going to do with so much of stock? That again goes back to the fact that we've been overproducing. So which is why people are now thinking that, okay, this is the way to do it. Now, for instance, we all know fashion is a seasonal commodity. It's not, that there's spring, summer, then you have fall, winter. People have started doing resort, cruise. So all of that excess has actually done this, the fact that so much inventory is out there. So one interesting experiment Zara and H&M have done in the West, they've created, also because shops were closed, they've created virtual vouchers. So instead of deep discounting a product, saying, okay, it's at 80% off, they've sent existing customers vouchers of $10, $20, $30, that whenever stores open, go and use this voucher. So for example, if I was to go and use it comes with those preconditions where you have to spend a $10 voucher at least on something that's $16 or $17, so that the cost of that product at least comes back to the company. So this you might see even happening in India. It could definitely, what people are predicting, could be one big way of getting shoppers back in at least not back in the stores, at least starting to buy again, whether it's online or otherwise. So one big thing that's come out of all this is the fact that social distancing has highlighted the fact that digital is the way forward. Everything, from like most Indian designers have websites, but we've been selling through a lot of third-party online arrangements, right? Very few of us have actually been able to successfully sell our own lines on digital platforms. And there have been reasons for that. One is that a lot of our product requires a lot of customization. So when somebody wants, this change, that change, he feels far more comfortable shopping in a shop environment than online. Secondly, that we've noticed that, of course, the online space is quite price sensitive. So you can't really have, you can't really send your top end stuff online. All of this we will need to change now. How are something we can even address after I finish the presentation? I'm Mr. Call. I'm open to ideas, because all of us are grappling with that. That how does the industry now lean towards digital and still ensure that, for example, it's not just in India. What about the entire NRI clientele that so many of us have, and so many of those people cannot travel now, and perhaps some of those countries, beat COVID, but their borders are closed and you still can't access. So how does one create, a bespoke experience, so to say, online? So consumers, of course, obviously been, second thing that's been happening, we've all had so much more time. Therefore, people have been spending far more time on social platforms than they ever did before. For example, most of us would end up spending at least 2 hours in transportation, right? Just going to your workplace, coming back, or going to office or school and coming back. So with those 2 hours, the fact that you're not that tired anymore because you're not specifically going to work. It's been noticed that people who haven't even engaged in the past on digital platforms, both in terms of social media as well as retail platforms, online retail platforms, are doing so. Online programming, as you know, which is no secret, that Netflix released a statement that they were scared at one point that they might crash because they've never seen so much consumption. So the one big thing that all of us have to learn from is the fact that fashion now will not survive without it being digital. That's one key thing. And I think that's a positive, because brands, companies will have to become digital frontrunners. We'll have to learn and invent new ways of interacting with people. For example, there was a very interesting article also that I read where they said that it's very difficult to take out the touch and feel factor from fashion. So, eventually we will have to find innovative ways, where someone even suggested that, apart from other things, what about a drive-through store, almost like those drive-in cinemas, where clothes are hung at quite a few feet away, but you can roll down your windows and literally drive through alleys of a shopping mall, where in a parking lot, and actually physically be able to see the product. Of course, there are fit issues which we don't know. We'll tackle that. One major impact that happens straight away, both in India as well as across the world, the last few shows that happened were only in Milan. There was no question of fashion weeks happening, because it involved gathering of people, which was considered highly dangerous, and in some countries, of course, it had been made illegal. So suddenly you had multiple shows with collections ready, designers who had produced the product, and it would have gone into their shops after the shows, had to cancel shows. Most were not ready to be able to digitize those things and put them out there. Also, I guess at that point of time, the shock of COVID was so high that people were not really interested in what exactly the fashion world had to say to them. But a few people reinvented instantly, and they did some home campaigns using their new lines. They did. There was this very interesting bag designer in Europe who actually asked model friends of his to send their existing pictures, and he put morphed bags onto their hands, and did a digital campaign of his new bags. So people had to really think now in terms of how digitally we're going to conduct fashion weeks. I don't know. The time will tell. A lot of technology will be involved. We had that whole talk on technology and fashion. I didn't know that when we had it, that 2 months later, we would have to marry technology into fashion much sooner than, and in a much bigger way and deeper way than I could ever think of. So moving on from there, what did the fashion industry learn from all this? What were the key takeaways? What were the basic insights that all of us will now have to follow? One of the most important ones that affected me a lot, and a lot of people are agreeing with me, is that to survive, luxury must hibernate. So, luxury is something that, and a good product is something that it's not like the demand will go away forever. Yes, people might stop spending right now. People will be more cautious. They'll only spend on essentials. But people who are luxury junkies and people and aspiring people who got that income, who want to delve into that luxury sphere, will definitely come back to experience it. Therefore, to keep the halo around it alive, but do not overproduce, do not take it out in large numbers, because right now people will not be interested. But 7, 8 months, 9 months from now, when this is probably when we have a vaccine, perhaps things will be very different, and we could see a major boom happening. So the other thing, which a lot of us, and I believe this fully, is that it's time to press Control-Alt-Delete. We need to reset the industry. We need to reassess the value chain. We need to reassess the roles of designers, assistant designers, designing teams, merchandisers, large companies that hired perhaps too many people who were, there were so many different positions created, and now unfortunately they're having to lay those people off simply because there could have been, people will be multitasking. That's a very important learning that we as entrepreneurs have done that since I graduated from college. So, and in a real world, that's now, I've spoken to a lot of industry leaders, and all of them are saying that that is something that we will all have to do, multitask and reassess the way we work. Then in terms of the most interesting learning, which is relevant to all of us, is the consumer behavior. So, of course, the lockdown taught us that our basic needs are our most important, right? From clean air, food, water, being with the family. And a lot of us, a lot of the reports, as you've seen, a lot of blogs have all said that all other consumption has been excessive and greedy. So having said that, it's that excessive and greedy that, feeds the fashion industry. But if we make fashion relevant and if we make interesting enough classic product, people will still come to buy it. It was the extra product which would eventually go in mass discounting, that didn't have focus, is what hopefully will be removed from the industry. Another interesting thing in terms of consumer behavior is that the way we communicate with customers will again have to change. The fact that people are not going to be, roaming around in malls instantly, browsing stores. How do you capture their attention digitally? It's not. What do you do that in light? What do you do in terms of ensuring that your loyal consumers, people who bought from you, keep coming back, want to know what's interesting, what's happening? So we're all internally, discussing innovative channels through which we can communicate with consumers, show them the product. Of course, there's Instagram, and we keep getting a lot of inquiries there, but we will need to even make those platforms even more interactive and more interesting. Another interesting thing, this is all on consumer, that most consumers have said that they would prefer to stay on the online platforms rather than on offline platforms. So yes, we are facing a digital revolution of sorts. But like I said earlier, uh, online retail is less profitable than physical retail. Many times there are various players in from warehousing to the companies who are actually taking the product. They're taking commissions. So the industry will have to work on different profit margins. Having said that, price points will have to become more reasonable. So overall, one is saying that yes, let's go digital, but in a way that it still offers a very interesting customer experience. The main thing behind fashion was a lot of people would come out, it was for the customer experience. So if we lose that and don't find innovative ways of connecting with the consumer, we're going to we're going to be lost. We're going to lose that consumer. One other key learning, which I briefly touched upon, was the fact that it's inevitable that with so much stock lying around across the world, only people with very deep pockets will not go into discounting. We will have to figure out how to, create these markdowns. Massive sales can, affect the halo around the brand, the desire around the brand. As you know, many brands don't even go on sale. A lot of that will perhaps change. We will have to find ways, interesting and innovative ways of taking the merchandise perhaps to different markets, which can again happen through the online platform. A lot of the online platforms are also actually engaging with us more now, saying that, from Amazon to so many others that are there in India that support fashion, that we'll have to find this collectively, this new approach, and without having to deeply discount the product. So, of course, there's been a very strong economic impact. We have large workforces to pay, people sitting at home, factories closed, stores closed. So incomes are zero, and our outflows are where they were. So that is going to affect from from people like myself to companies all the way up to Giorgio Armani and up to Zara, all the departmental stores, all the manufacturers, every person, because one is going to have to dig into reserves. Again, how long can you sustain that? We don't know. We don't know when these stores will open, when malls will open, when factories will open. And then even if that's the case, will people actually come back to buy? These are all questions that only time will tell. Another thing the industry's learned is that many brands will stay away from fashion weeks. A lot of designers have said we need to change this preset calendar system. This is when fashion week will happen. We will show a season in advance, then start producing those goods depending on the orders, then deliver those goods. A lot of people are saying we will have each person, depending on where they live and who they cater to, will have to change the way they function. For example, you all have heard of the buy now, see now policy. I think we will have to adopt that in India very, very soon, which means that we would actually do a show, say in whether virtual or physical, do a show at the end of February, and that merchandise is in the shop in the first week of March. So that you produce less, you're giving more windows for both seasons to sell, eliminate a lot of the other drops, a lot of the random seasons that we used to cater to. And a lot of people will start setting their own pace. I want to skip fashion week. I do not want to do a regular show. I will do a digital presentation. You will see that happening as a trend across the world. So, for example, when we talk about that, I look at you guys for ideas that, what can be interesting ways of engaging new consumers that does not involve spending lakhs and lakhs of rupees in putting together a very expensive fashion show platform the way we used to 2 months ago, and finding new and interesting ways to communicate with the consumer. of course, recovery from the pandemic will uh, there's going to be a lot of recession. We're going to be competing with so many different players, large players, smaller players. So all of us have to adapt our operating models. We need to all think that okay, what were the things we were doing? How can we do them better, more efficiently, more cost effectively? So I think all brands, all companies right now are rethinking their operating models. So that, for instance, when you're on the treadmill, you never actually have the chance to think about that because machines are running 24/7, orders are coming. You're not thinking about how can I increase efficiency because you're just so involved in day-to-day activities. So I hopefully that will change. Now this was a statistic from Europe and America which says that 65% of consumers are expecting to decrease their spending, and 40% are saying they will overall decrease their spending, even on households, even their household spending. People have lost jobs, people have are going through a very difficult time. Everybody wants to hold on to their money. So we're in that kind of position. What do we produce is a very big question. That say our factories open and we're out there, where do we start? How do we make the new products? Those are the key questions that all of us have been addressing either on webinars or in between our telephonic conversations. So there are some interesting learnings there as well, that the industry is saying these are some of the key things that companies of all sizes will have to look into, from innovating a long-term strategy to future-proof their business model, which again goes back to what I was saying earlier. We'll have to adapt and rethink the way we are producing. Then, of course, cost parameters, everybody's wanting to reduce, right? Key assets, personnel, we've already, like I said, which across the fashion world right now, there is no manufacturing or sourcing or any of that happening. Yes, there are Zoom calls and meetings and all that, but beyond that, perhaps in China something has started as of now, but not to my knowledge. But besides that, nothing is happening across the world. Then we will have to, evolve and empower a new workforce, adopt new skills, which is what I was talking about earlier. We will have to find, different ways of working. So people are talking about, of course, virtual design studios, far smaller production units liaising with design studios over Zoom, for example, and the industry learning how to manage by remote control, something that the industry's never ever done. So all that is something we will all have to eventually adapt to. Then, of course, surviving this actual difficult time is a key thing, right? We've got to hang in there. You will see a lot of brands perhaps disappear or have to shut shop, which will be very sad. But the idea is, let's look at everything I've spoken about and if we try and apply as many changes as we can, perhaps things will, brands will survive and we will get over this. But yes, we need to have a recovery plan. We need to have an action plan. We need to figure out how exactly we're going to do this. Of course, there are, there are going to be new restrictions in which companies will work, from new COVID policies. There are agencies now coming into India that are wanting to come in and certify whether you're a company that can function with COVID still around, and the fact that what are the how do you train your staff, your canteen people, your coffee boys to maintain social distance, to wear gloves. A lot of their, it's a full new learning for all of us. And then this for me is a very, very important thing. I in fact talked about it with the president of FDCI the other day, that That's something they should get involved in. A lot of people are saying that across the world, and specifically in India, because we're a very specific consumer luxury market, that players will need to share data. The more data we can share, the more strategies we can have in common, it will all collectively help us navigate the storm, and therefore ensure that most of us get through it rather than get stuck in it or disappear in it. Fashion executives and leaders are currently focusing on management, whereas the design professionals are thinking of how to reimagine product, reimagine the industry altogether. So I think, having said all this, where does fashion go from here? What will the world of fashion be like when all this is over? Now, this is obviously not just a question on my mind. It's a question that on all of your minds. Everybody wants to know the answer to that. Not that I have the answer, but I just have a few insights which are more positive, and we can discuss that. Right after Fashion Week didn't happen, so Sylvia Fendi managed to show. That was probably the last show that happened in Milan. I think, I can't remember whether it was 2nd or 3rd of March. And Giorgio Armani had to show the next day. And although, the spread was a little outside of Milan in an area called Lombardy, but Milan lies in that province. So he took a call and did a shut the doors. So did the fashion show, but only on video and for no live audience. And everything was just telecast out of that because, the planning had been done, the set, models, all of that had been done. So, but he didn't want to bring in his 1,000 people into that hall. So did the show, but it was viewed virtually. So after that, right after that, the journalist asked him, what Mr. Armani, where do you think, why is all this happening? What are you guys going to take away from this? And his comment has since then been reprinted, and I don't know how many times. And again, I think this is where you guys come in, because like I said, you are the future of tomorrow, that we need to regain our long lost soul. Fashion had lost its soul. If you look at what was happening in fashion in the 30s, 50s, when you had serious couturiers belting out some of the most incredible craft, from Coco Chanel to Madame Schiaparelli, that was phenomenal talent. People were not overproducing, but all of us know that Chanel jacket. We all know that black dress that she invented. So those clothes were made out of a soul. What we have been doing for the last 30 years is overproduction, just producing to keep the numbers up. All of that, he says, needs to go, and we need to figure out and reinvent with a completely new soul. One very interesting and thing specifically, this is relevant to all of you, both in terms of a consumer and especially as people in the design industry. After the 2008 meltdown, the crash in financial markets in America, one very interesting thing happened where when markets stabilized a couple of years after, all the stores showed signs of clothes that were being sold were all from the minimalistic movement. What that means is all the minimal designers, the simple, the more elegant clothing, the over the top, exuberant, very loud, lots of color, too much embellishment, all that stopped selling. So people noticed elegant colors, very simplistic and good quality clothing is what happened in terms of a movement straight after. Of course, 3-4 years into that, the whole thing changed into street, but which has been the rage for the last 10 years. But immediately after, that's how people reacted. People wanted, the trend became, even if it's expensive, we want to buy a very, very elegant jacket that we can wear for the next 10 years. So again, people are predicting that is something that will happen even at a bigger level this time. That people will come back to say, I don't know if that's good news or bad news for a lot of you who perhaps do not like the concept of minimalism. Luckily for me personally, I've been given the title of the fact that I started the minimalist movement in India. So that for me, this is one of the only silver linings in this presentation. When I look positively, I hope that that simple clothing will be appreciated. People would want to go out there and buy a nice suit or a very, very nicely tailored white shirt. And so for a lot of you who are perhaps, and there's nothing wrong with being that, but you will have to reinvent a little bit to perhaps tone those ideas down and create value in a product where when the customer sees it, he knows he can wear it much more than one time. That is the big change that we all have to do as designers. We'll have to rethink product. So when we're talking about staying on that minimalist, what I mean by that is there's a term called investment pieces, where people buy those things almost like they're buying jewelry. So it's like buying a very expensive black suit or a Chanel black dress. That's something you will wear for the next 15 years unless your size changes. Even if that happens, you will give it to your sister, your daughter, and make sure that it's passed on like an heirloom. So a lot of the brands are going to focus on those investment pieces that when you'll go out there, even in the high street, you'll notice that when sales start and when stores open up, design will be made simpler, design will be made happier, and design will look like classics which can last forever. One very interesting thing that's come out of all this, which is being talked about now across the world. Yes, it was being talked about across the world prior to this also. However, there were conferences on it. There were people, you guys was even I'm sure in college have discussed it. We've attended seminars, but really were all of us giving it the attention it deserved? And I include myself in that. I've harped on about sustainability and sustainable processes, sustainable design, sustainable clothing. Yes, to some extent, we've all done our parts, whether it's delving into khadi or trying to make zero waste clothes. But now more than ever, everybody's saying the consumer will be looking at it that way. The consumer will want to spend money on something that he feels, oh, he's giving back. That people don't want to look at it as irresponsible. There are two things. One is irresponsible practice, where I as a brand don't practice sustainability. And second is the consumer is going to feel guilty about spending large sums of money on something that he finds has not been made in a sustainable manner. So the consumer will also look for it. Designers will have to make sure their processes are highly sustainable. Their companies follow sustainable ideas, responsibilities. Of course, product will become key. So there's been let's make sure this is now not a trend. This is something that the industry is saying. All of us at whatever levels, whether a student to Giorgio Armani, everybody must start thinking sustainable. We need to rewire our systems. We need to rethink how we can add value in that sustainable chain, because consumption will drive that. And staying on that, sustainability credentials will get employed, and people will value that when buying a product, right? And those guys, those are the brands and the companies who will do those things will be the ones who will not have to discount product excessively. They will have to stay. They will survive this storm. Another very interesting thing people are talking about, which in India again is not something that's happened. It's not. There's no online platform as of right now that does this, but there are a few rental platforms that exist where you can go and rent your wedding lehenga, for example. But one very big thing people are talking about in the West are resale of luxury clothing, resale of expensive pre-owned items. So the market across the world, they're saying, in the next 3 years could be $50 billion. That's a very, very large number. So that's again a very big business opportunity for entrepreneurs, because that's, people would want to, a lot of people will perhaps have the consumers would have excessive product. A lot of it they might want to get rid of. And so imagine being able to buy something that was originally a lakh of rupees, and you've used it 8 or 10 times, and you're getting, say, half the money back for it. And the guy who buys it again is buying it for, say, 60,000. So you will see this as a big trend people are seeing emerging. So I'm sure perhaps even in India, I could see it working. Then, of course, something we talked about in terms of how does fashion work from a distance. So a lot of people are now working on developing the virtual tools. So I think, I don't know if only Zoom will be enough. We will have to find other methods. A lot of companies are actually, as we speak, are working on how to make that happen, and how we will communicate with merchandisers, with store floor managers. So virtual tools in fashion, please, if you guys have ideas, we can have a separate class just on that. Then these are sort of more about how power will shift in companies. When you don't meet people, when you don't go to work day to day, and you're interacting with them just on Zoom or other social media platforms, people are predicting that there will be, power struggles at higher levels in the office. Yes, you guys are still far away from that, but it's important for you to know that that's something even you might even experience during an interview. So it's better to be aware of that rather than not be aware of that. Another very interesting thing that I want to talk about is what happens when stores reopen. How are we going to, there'll be massive piles of stock which have been around during the lockdown. Everything's going to be overstocked. You'll have perhaps a lot of sales of offers of buy one get three free and all of that. But the question I want to ask is, how many of us are still going to go to those stores? We don't know. I mean, for example, if you were to ask me personally, I don't know if I'm confident of, going into a mall and walking around and, buying things the way I used to. So it's still a big question mark, especially in terms of non-essentials, which is where luxury and clothing exists. People are saying that, even wandering through even a Zara store, forget luxury, where there are hundreds of hangers, how we were used to just browse through racks and touch hangers and pick up clothes and try them on. Are all of us going to be comfortable doing that? So imagine virtual tools, even from the side of the consumer, from the side of the seller, will have to be created. Of course, there were those virtual mirrors where you could select a product online, and you have your camera on and it shows you how it will look on you. Those existed. But as we speak, companies are developing ideas of how to help sale, because nobody knows if people will feel comfortable roaming around departmental stores, in malls, running their fingers through racks and racks of clothing. Then on the shop floors, for example, I'd already mentioned to you about those luxury drive-throughs, where they'll re-sanitize hangers, re-sanitize garments. Imagine walking into a luxury store and there are people with wearing masks and gloves and PPEs. I don't know if maybe that's going to be the future. For instance, in India, I'm very concerned because, for instance, we can discuss it once I'm done, that especially when we talk about luxury in India, majority of it, remember, is our wedding market, right? Which is a very, very large market. And but as all of you know, that buying wedding clothes I don't know how many of you will you be able to buy, when you guys get married in a few years from now, will you be able to buy your clothes online? Will you be able to buy a lehenga online without even trying it on or seeing it? So these are challenges that lie ahead of us. So in terms of the specifically what's happening in the luxury market, which has similar repercussions to us in India, is that people are saying, of course, luxury will be more affected than anybody else. Obviously, the financial numbers at a level like Zara or H&M will be much higher because of the number of stores they have. But for instance, when you talk about price points, obviously the $5,000 product will be, will see far less consumption than the $5 shirt at H&M. So you will find that this sector is the first one that shrinks when any sort of economic downfall or when the global economy falls. That's the revenues fall. The first thing that gets impacted is luxury. That is important because again, we have to rethink of how we perceive luxury. How do we put, you as young designers, how do you create a luxurious product without making it excessively expensive? So those are, again, a lot of homework for you guys to think about. Consumption will become very, very cautious. So people will buy very little. They'll buy only what's, especially in the luxury segment. For example, yes, marriages for instance, we don't know as of right now that most marriages this year and big events have already been cancelled or postponed. We don't know how the state of COVID will progress, when the vaccine will come out. Will we have those gatherings of more than 20 or 50 people allowed or not? So, for example, when we talk about luxury, one very interesting thing that we spoke about that day, yes, perhaps a customer of mine will still want to buy an Ashish Soni, but he'll say, I don't have a wedding to go to. I don't have to go to the office anymore, but I'm meeting my immediate family. I'm meeting my 4 friends at home. Maybe our whole way of living, we're not going to be in restaurants, but our entertaining at home will go up. So perhaps, those small dinner parties that which were people used to do once in a while will become the norm moving forward. So for example, that guy might say, Ashish, we want a really nice shirt, just some very interesting shirts which I can wear. I don't want to spend a lot of money, but I still want to look nice when I meet my friends. So consumption will change. We will have to reinvent. And so the shirt still has to make him feel as if he's bought a luxury product. So those are the changes. For example, personally, I am thinking of how we're going to bring that about. The next 6 months definitely are going to be the most difficult. From restarting, rewiring, replanning, creating those virtual stores, creating the virtual tours. For example, companies are contacting us saying, we can create a virtual tour from the time you enter Emporio to your store, to every product in your store. And you can send that as a link to all your customers, and they can see what's in the store. And after that, if they want something, you can have somebody deliver it to their house or take it to their house specifically for a fitting or to try on in different sizes or colorways. Then again, one thing we talked about earlier, the fewer better things are what customers will want. So you as designers have to design fewer better things. That's a very clear message. Focus on quality, focus on very interesting product. I mentioned to you when I spoke to you last that stories are going to become very, very important, right? We will need to create a story behind our product. We've always needed to, but because we were overproducing, you couldn't overproduce stories. So now design will have to become more thoughtful if it has to become lesser and more meaningful. For example, this statistic was a specifically positive one, so I thought of talking about it. That 2008, when the crisis happened, it showed that within you can't keep the super rich from spending their money. Remember, they're locked down like all of us sitting at home doing exactly the same thing. Perhaps their millions of dollars are not disappearing, but so when the time is right, those guys will get out there and want to shop. So like it happened in 2009, where the very, very expensive things started selling because these rich people came out and said, enough is enough. We want to spend, we want to buy these, we want to experience luxury like we used to. You can't keep the rich away for very, very long. So we are all hoping and praying that that shall happen again. And that's a big positive for all of us. One other very interesting fact, which some of you might have already read about, is that a sign of this was experienced in China literally 3 weeks ago, when after they opened up Wuhan and declared it non-COVID and all that. The day they opened their malls, Shanghai, the Hermes store had a sale of $2.7 million in one day. The Chinese went into the stores and shopped like it was gone out of style. And $2.7 million for any brand anywhere in the world, especially after a crisis like this, was just an exuberant number. Nobody knew, so that became the fashion headline. So you never know, you could have, even if we have that a little bit. And remember, the positive for us is we are that many people, we're almost as many people as there are in China. So when things are normal and a little better, perhaps we'll have a different form of revenge shopping. We might have people ordering excessively online. We might have people who are saying, no, enough is enough. I want to wear my designer clothes. So fingers crossed that too could happen. So key points as I end the presentation, that consumers will want, either way, their shopping to be experiential. We will have to really think about how to make it experiential. From sales associates to thinking about how those people dress, almost behaving like personal shoppers, keeping in touch with them more often, which we didn't because we were like, acha, ye consumer nahi hai, to dusra hai. We will have to stop doing all that. We'll have to pay attention and keep our consumers loyal and find interesting ways of keeping them engaged with our product and with us. Then, of course, the fact that we're going to be a fully virtual society, and in multiple levels. That's what oligopoly means, that various different ways in which we'll be virtual. We'll need to be seen at all times in all different ways, connect with the consumer and deeply impact that consumer, but without interfering in his personal space. So that, it's not like I can send 10 emails to a consumer a day and expect him to not react and be irritable about that. Of course, this is a fact that's been experienced across the world, that the fashion industry obviously will take, because of its nature, will take longer to recover than the rest of the economy. Obviously, people will want to spend, money on essentials, and the commodities businesses will recover faster. The FMCG businesses will recover faster. Obviously, luxury and clothing will follow. Yes, we're all hoping that with all these new packages that the government has announced, some of which, yes, impact the industry, but very few in positive ways, apart from the salary help and loans that we can go and take. Then in terms of the future steps that all of us need to take, is that we need to connect with the consumer. We need to find innovative ways to be in their mind. We need to think of a broader business mission, where, again, product and designers like yourself play a very important part in helping us, because I always say that you guys have far, far more energy than all of us. So, fresh ideas, new, interesting concepts, both in terms of product and connecting with consumers, how to, market a product, market a brand in this new virtual space. I'm sure There are, a lot, I know for a fact that you guys are far more digital savvy than say most other 40-year-olds. So you guys are going to take this leap forward. So in one way, actually, if I was to look at it in a very positive manner, uh, if we forget about all the gloomy statistics and focus on the positive, there's a lot of in this for you guys, because you are a digital society, and so you guys know the future, and therefore will adapt to all of this far more easily than, for example, my mother, for instance, how I don't see her shopping online or logging onto sites and interacting with consumers. So you're the future. You guys will have to create these, both the design ideas and from the consumer point of view, come up with interesting ways of interacting with the consumer. Yes, we'll see a lot of discounting, which we've talked about before. Again, the big word there is, let's stay sustainable, let's stay minimalist, let's make investment worthy pieces, let's make classics, and all this will be driven by anti-consumerism. Then when the dust settles, of course, players who've innovated, players who've been able to, keep their product out there, customers engaged, have created those virtual tools, both in terms of their internal company functions, like which I talked about, as well as their connects with consumers. They'll be the ones to survive. This is very interesting for you because you guys will be part of this sooner or later, where people are saying that new habits already being put to test, and almost 84%, there's a 84% increase in the remote working video conferencing environment. And so, when you guys get job, be ready for a lot of video interactions. And 58% people are finding an increase in flexibility from working from home. So that could definitely be something that all of you might experience. I mean, I hope not. But given the way things are progressing, a lot of companies are saying, even when things are normal, even when there's a virus, there's a lot of positivity researchers have found in people working from home. The ones who benefit from it, they're saying we will keep on working that way. There's a new study that's talking about the fact that if even large companies are saying that even before we find a cure or a vaccine, they're thinking of doing a 4-day week and then a 10-day holiday. So if you interact even with a large number of people for 4 days and then you don't see them for 10 days, the incubation time, apparently doctors are saying, gets taken care of. So the 10 days you'll be on virtual interaction, 4 days you'll be, so basically 8 days a month you'll interact with your colleagues face to face, and 20 days you will interact with them over the internet. Then, of course, like I said, the sky is the limit. So don't let the innovation stop. Don't let your creative juices down. Yes, it's a gloomy atmosphere, and people are sick, but hey, nobody can take away your creativity. So while you're sitting at home, you have, presuming your holidays coming soon, let's reinvent the future. Let's think of interesting ideas. Let's think of those design stories. Let's reimagine the product. There are lots of ways that we can make this happen. And finally, on the last slide, just to show you what people are saying, how the industry might start functioning over the next few years, is that a lot of investment will go into 3D design. So from 3D printing of clothing, artificial intelligence will come in. We discussed that briefly, even the last time I spoke with you. There's only a certain amount of design that a robot can do. The rest we will have to do. So, but yes, you could be, you might be hired, for example, to be part of a 3D design team, or you might have to do a tech program to understand artificial intelligence. From there, design will start interacting with virtual sampling, where perhaps we could see the you'll interact with the merchandising and planning department only on video, and they will figure out ways of how to virtually sample that product, bring it back to the design team, see its input, check the buttons, check the buttonhole, shoulder seam, stitches per inch, do all that. And then you're selling, even selling, for example, from virtual showrooms to a digital buy-in, a digital sell-in, both in terms of B2B and B2C. Then how you're going to supply those products, how will you integrate vendors? Will there be, maybe brick and mortar stores will be reduced in numbers? We don't know. So that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer questions and any ideas that you guys might have for me.
Okay, can I thank you, Ashish, for a very erudite and very sort of insight. I must say my level of understanding has shot up many notches quite a bit, and I really give it to you for getting that deep understanding. And it's based on a lot of reading that you're doing, and I know a lot of designers don't do that because they're very much focused on their craft alone. But I think you sort of are stepping out a little bit more, and that's why you have always been a pillar of the Indian fashion industry. And we're very happy that you have been associated with all along. I would like to say that, good, you gave a very balanced view in terms of the changes. I'd just like to take 2 minutes to say some of the points that you mentioned. I'd just like to amplify, which made sense to me from the point of view of the students. One, it's not as if COVID is inventing something new. There are already changes that are happening, like in fast fashion is coming to its end, and new. And what COVID has done is it has speeded up the whole thing. Basically, the changes have speeded up, and that's why we feel a little bit of a disarray. But this speeding up is, in a sense, good because it brings out the newer things. There's a pain for a shorter amount of time, let me put it this way. The second thing I would like to say is that all this is a great bonanza for young designers. This is real bonanza, and for old folks like us, perhaps we go into the sunset. But this is because technology and digitization is heavily meshed into all this now. Fashion cannot. Earlier, it was never into technology really, but now it is not. Everything else is getting put, whether it's restaurants and deliveries, everything is getting, shopping, retailing is getting into technology, and fashion has stayed away. But now we cannot say that. So digitization is happening. And what is the biggest thing in digitization? It is really creating a democracy. You can be very big, but you're as big as the screen only. You can be shopper stop and you can have a collection, and you can be one designer working out of your home and you have as big a screen. And we have seen this in whether in Zomato and other things. Secondly, from a marketing point of view, earlier marketing was very tough and expensive. So only the big fish gobbled a lot. But today, I know because my son is in Zomato, and all these restaurants, the marketing is entirely through the system of Zomato, because every player in the restaurant or the buyers are already on their servers. So it is not a question of researching, it's a question of analytics. How do you analyze that? And I think our young friends who are watching this are better adept at it than us.
Correct.
They're better adept at it. So if I had to put my money, I would put it on them. And I would like to say that the future is still for innovation, which is what designers are known for, except it's not along the old lines. And this is what I think the young people who take over from us should really look at and be as innovative as they can, really. And just on the lighter side, I would like to say perhaps we will get a new collection where you just have to design your collars, because you spend half the time on Zoom or other things, and you don't need, you just need a shirt and an underwear. That's it. Would this be a new trend? Would this be a new trend in designing?
Thinking of designing suits which are just till your waist.
Just till your waist, exactly.
Half sleeve, and just so the sleeves are there, and that's it.
Exactly. You don't need to design langas because you get married on Zoom and you just need to talk to it.
True.
So okay, so okay. That's so. I would like to give a clap for Ashish, and let's open it to the students and others. Yeah. Any questions, Kriti, you have put together? Okay, I think you will have to unmute.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. So, no, what I was saying, Ashish, was I just wanted to bring up one point here to, for a food for thought and a discussion that a lot of people are going virtual, yes. So marketing going virtual, fashion shows are soon going to be going virtual as well. And so I was reading in a couple of places, and also I understand that our Export Council of India, they're also planning. And I think it's a good idea because all these people, when they are exhibiting, one, the exhibition cost becomes much lesser. So what I have got to know or to understand, one stall is just about a 9,500 rupees. And it's so much of a cost saving, and the rest you do on your 3D photo, 3D walkthroughs, your showrooms. And even even better is the fact that these people actually will be open 21 all days throughout, and they are actually catering to actually enter your showroom and enter your spaces and look at your products, and and for the touch and feel, you can probably, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, you courier or sample pieces to them, or the fabrics or the pieces or whatever. So it saves a lot of money both to the people who are designers and also the buyers, because they don't also get to travel, and they are sitting at their own time and in their own spaces. So that's something you should put a little bit of your comments on.
No, that's you're absolutely right. Those are just the immediate benefits, right? Where, for instance, nobody could have thought, like I said, because we were never getting off our high horses, never getting off the treadmill, to even consider these things. Where, for example, like you mentioned, that virtual showrooms could be far more cost-effective than physical ones. We haven't even delved into a virtual show. None of us even know the cost of it. Perhaps when those costs come and one realizes that how much cheaper or cost effective it is to do a virtual show than a real one, because even if you put together a show and film it and air it, look at the number of people that it reaches, plus the cost that you save by not having people physically present there. For instance, one cost I can think of straight away is that the place doesn't require air conditioning, there's no seating required, there are no fire exits. There's so many. So you're right. Maybe there are various hidden benefits in this, which will emerge as a major opportunity in this disaster, which all these young students will benefit from. And like Mr. Kaul said, we'll have a reinvented industry. And these guys are the future in terms of handling that industry much better than all of us.
I'm sure. And also that they are learning these, the digital technology and everything. So when they have to sit at home and work, all they have to do is have their laptops in their places, and then they're ready to work, because they're creating stuff online and they're selling it online.
That's right.
And
Yeah, it's a very good.
Everything is going.
Very
Maintenance will also get
point.
much lesser, because you're not really spending on keeping them in all the time.
That's right.
Yeah. Kriti ma'am, you have any other questions for
Hi,
Ashish?
Ashish. I'm Mani Bajaj, Chief
Mani
Mentor of International College of Fashion. Hi, Mr. Call.
Hi.
So I have two questions. One was that do you see that fashion is going to become more casual? Because we did discuss about trends very elaborately, but do you see that happening? I experience that every day while getting into a meeting. I would think that today I'm going to dress formal, but then I end up picking up that T-shirt and tracks and just being very comfortable. And the other was that you went back into history, compared 2008 crisis with today's scenario. What if we go back further to the Spanish flu time, because it's more similar, the scenario was similar to ours right now. Did that impact fashion in any way which we could learn from?
Hi, Vani. So to answer your first question, what you're saying is 100% true. So when I talk about the fact that fashion will move towards a minimalistic look, that kind of minimalism, apart from being less is more, also revolves around comfort. What the one thing that the last 50 days have taught us is that, for example, like you said, for example, perhaps I've worn a shirt 5 times, either when it was my daughter's birthday or 4 or 5 webinars that I've been on. Otherwise, like you said, it's in one has also learned to live in less, right? So, for instance, I have personally lived in 6 pairs of shorts and 6 t-shirts for the last 50 days. So yes, we've all gotten used to more comfortable clothing, and what the more bigger socioeconomic impact on this is going to be, our lives are going to become far more casual. So, for instance, people will want to buy comfortable clothing. There was a review that I was reading where it said that there are online platforms in the US that have sold out all types of yoga pants for women.
Really?
They are wanting tons and tons of yoga pants, and there's nobody to make them, simply because that all of that, whatever was available on those sites, people have bought, because that's going to be that's a new reality, right? We are going to spend more time at home. We're going to be more casual, even when we're out with our friends. For example, I talked about interacting with, say, 8 people or 7 people, which is perhaps what's going to be it's going to get limited down to. So, for instance, if, say, I was meeting 8 of you for dinner, I'm not going to come dressed in a suit. I would be far more casual in my approach. I'm meeting friends. I'm going to somebody's house. I will not be that doled up. So yes, to answer that first part, definitely, I think this will create a movement towards more easier dressing, much more comfort dressing. People will tend to look simpler, easier. I'm presuming people will not be going to salons that often as they would have normally. So yeah, there will be a whole cultural shift in this. And to go back to your second question, yes, of course, if you were to go back to 1920, and even go look into what happened after that, when the World War happened. Immediately after the pandemic, firstly, remember, there was no concept of luxury back then, right? Apart from the fact that there was a pandemic, it wasn't dealt with the way, the way the world is trying to hopefully deal with it now. In terms of, yes, there was lockdown, but where were the medical facilities? Where were doctors and ventilators? Obviously, there was none of that. So poverty levels were way, way higher. Therefore, the emphasis on fashion was not as much as, for example, how it's been with us over the last 10, 15 years. But a direct impact of that was rationing. So, from the flu, immediately after the flu, was the war. So a very interesting thing I want to share with you, since you brought it up, is that this concept of, you guys have all heard of turn-ups on trousers, right? So the concept of turn-ups sort of emerged after the pandemic and after the World War, specifically to culturally demarcate the rich from the average. So there was so much poverty that, for example, if our average man had to go and buy a trouser and get it tailored, for example, they would tend to do that in, say, 1 meter of cloth. Therefore, the trouser would be short. It could not have turn-ups. Because turn-ups would require an extra 30 centimeters.
Right. Okay. So
And if I was a super rich guy and I survived the pandemic, I survived the war, I would have looser, baggier trousers, which meant कि मैं ज़्यादा कपड़ा afford कर सकता हूँ. My trousers would be turned up. So, for example, there are if you go to certain clubs in the UK even now, it says turned up trousers in the bar. So people would distinguish each other from the fact of whether your trousers had turn-ups or you didn't have turn-ups, you know.
It's very interesting.
There's a connection to what you're saying. It's always been there because we're human. So yes, there's going to be a cultural impact of that, perhaps in the way that we discussed, where, you know, our lives will become more casual. I think I'm hoping and that apart from casual, that, you know, we've read and seen on TV and on social media that everybody talking about, you know, this is a good time to go inwards and all of that, and so if you think about all of that, I'm hoping there's going to be a more of a cultural shift from not our clothing being casual, from even within our headspaces, to, you know, people being more relaxed, and people, once this is over, we've dealt with so much anxiety, that you might see a different world emerge.
Hopefully a better world.
Yeah.
Definitely a better world. Okay, so also one thing, you were talking about sustainability, and now we're also looking at a lot of handcrafted and handmade and handlooms. So wouldn't you equate that to luxury? Because that by itself is an expensive proposition. So getting something handcrafted, getting something sustainable
Absolutely.
is an
all those are the
already.
Absolutely.
So when you say luxury has to hibernate, does it really have to? Yeah, because we don't see luxury getting hibernated, no?
So conventional luxury, like Paul said, has to hibernate. You know, but things you're describing
are new luxuries. Yes.
It's all about
handloom, handmade, you know, hand sewn. Those are all, for example, a lot of those are activities that we support in India, and we have access to India, unlike the West. So for us, those are our biggest win-wins. Those are our tools that we should, all the young designers from all of us, every brand, they'll be looking at all of that. Those are going to be essential components of the way we rewire the future.
Right, and then create stories, of course.
Absolutely.
Around it.
And those, you know, for example, when you said stories, imagine people, you know, if you're supporting 11 or 12 families who again have 7 to 8 family members, just by providing them livelihood to weave your fabric, that's a story in itself, you know. So perhaps we weren't giving it as much relevance as we should have 2 months ago. All that will change when that shirt is hanging on a rack, even in India. Now the consumer will read that tag, that this one purchase supports a family of 7. You know, so like I said, a lot of that will matter, and people even from the consumer point of view, people will look at those things far more interestingly than they did 3 months ago.
Yeah, so I think. I don't know, Mr. Kaul, you would probably be able to add that you just mentioned, that one. Their story of this craft, these families, yeah?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yes, so you know, the story of that particular family. So and so, and this is what they do, and this is their specialization. This one piece had taken so much time. So that one tag could be added, which talk.
I can see a designer sitting in a village.
So that you.
And he has people working around him, and any buyer can have constant sort of communication, audio-visual communication. They can actually see the products being made in the village, which will add value to it, being
Very
made by
interesting.
hand.
Very
And
interesting.
they can go through sort of a studio right there and see various garments which are there, and they could buy something expensive and they can actually see, oh, this is my garment being made. It's a I don't know, 10,
No, no,
10
that's
lakh
the point.
langa. This
Yeah.
is and that's my langa being made. How far is it gone? That adds value to it, I think, because there is a story to it, the village, the setting, the and the designer is like a conductor, a symphony conductor. He's putting all the village, the weather, the climate, the relationships, and the beauty of the weave itself, the production itself into the garment.
I think that's a great idea, Mr. Call. In fact, I was thinking that I think the next time we interact, we should get all of us to come up with our ideas like this
Right.
and have a brainstorming session where, including the students, where they should, I'm sure they'll have some very interesting inputs, and we should all share some of these revolutionary
In
thoughts
fact,
in
I
terms
think
of
I
how
think there
to,
are a lot more newer opportunities
yeah,
which are just round the corner, and we have to just find them and
yeah, and tune
stake our
them to
claim.
our businesses.
Right. Right. Okay. Any questions you can transmit from the students, Baj or Kriti, or
I'm sure we have a couple of
Yeah.
that
and here?
come up. Kriti, if you all can, if I'm audible here.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask on behalf of this students and people getting into fashion, um, what would be your advice to people? We are talking about the future and opportunities, but as of today, in the next 12 months, 14 months, what should these youngsters should do? Should they really play safe and get a job within fashion? Should they go to fashion-related lines, whether it's choreography or photography or any other related area, styling? Should they go the conventional path? Should they really strike out on their own because this is a golden opportunity? Um, uh, which are the skills which would be especially important, like we mentioned, digital and all that, and of course, learning more. What is your advice to students now? How should they proceed?
So, firstly, I would tend to think that if, for instance, if people who want to get hired in the industry, the first thing all of us will be looking at are very well-rounded individuals, people who will come to us with, for instance, which was not perhaps not the case 3 months ago, where we would hire
Specialists.
design-specific people for design and merchandise-specific people. So here, for instance, instead of having a design team of 7 or 8, I would perhaps have a design team of only 4 people. Therefore, I would be looking at someone who is far more well rounded in terms of
Multiple tasks.
has in-depth knowledge of technology, has ideations on how they can help us create virtual options, both in terms of communications between ourselves as well as ideations between liaison between customers. develop products, come to us with ideas of where they have the ideation in terms of product. It's a new story. A lot of us will look at people who are coming to us offering solutions. Vis-a-vis, otherwise conventional hiring used to be where we would hire somebody, put them into a training program, let them be in the sampling department for 3 months, let them be on the production floor for 3 months, and then they work themselves. They work their way up in terms of working with assistant designer, then with a head designer, and then directly under me. So what would happen is that everyone would be hiring less. So I would look at hiring people who have a overall in-depth knowledge of both, which is why I wanted to address the students today in a manner so they know what's going on in the world. They know what are the different challenges their potential employers would have. Therefore, if people they come to us with an understanding of what our challenges are, and we would be happier to hire them than as pure design professionals. Otherwise, yes, you're right in terms of launching your own labels. Obviously, the next 6-8 months will tell us where the industry is heading. And one thing is for certain, that nobody in one sense, these guys are very lucky because they will have so much information to take as starting points. There's so much information out there that when they collate it, what they do for their launches, for how they create the product, will be information that nobody had in the last 10 years when they were trying to launch a fashion label. So yes, but my advice would be, read a lot, read what's going on in fashion in India, see what the designers are saying, see what the markets are saying, see what the professionals in the industry are saying, because that will help you in an understanding of what's required of you in a professional environment.
Kriti ma'am, questions please.
Yes, ma'am, I have a few questions. The students want to know what kind of skills would be required apart from the classroom teachings to be successful as a student or employee in the industry. What are the skills that will be required apart from what we generally learn in college?
So like I mentioned in the last question itself, we would be looking at people that are very good on digital and very good with technology. Which was not the case 3 months ago. That suddenly become a prerequisite, and it's not something that was being taught in classrooms. So the more savvy you are digitally will definitely give you an edge over somebody who's not. Then if you come to us with go for an interview where what are the challenges that the industries are facing, you will and have come to us with ideations of solutions. We think of you as somebody who's come to us not only for a job but as problem solver. So again, that will require a lot of common sense, right? So beyond what's the conventional, what would happen? Let's talk about what happened 3 months ago, right? When we would hire somebody, we would hire them only on their brilliance in terms of design, on what they offer, what their story was, what their vision is. Today, we are going to be looking at much more than that. And those are the parts we're discussing, that are they problem solvers? Do they apply the common sense in everything? Are they well read? Are they good with technology? Do they have solutions for us that we don't have for ourselves? Those are some things that I would be looking at. And when I say I talk about the industry at large.
So being a visionary, basically.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of people we'd like to hire.
Right. So we talked about sustainability. So how will these eco-friendly resources, fabrics fare in future? Because there's a certain cost that comes along with it. How about the cost factor?
See, that's what we were discussing. That instead of buying where fashion was over-consumed, so instead of buying, say at any price point, right? Whether you were buying a 100 rupee shirt or a 10,000 rupee shirt. say you were buying, each of those people were buying 5 or 6 or 10 shirts. That will hopefully stop. Whereas even if the eco-friendly fabric or a handloom fabric is more expensive, so people would rather buy two eco-friendly products that are made out of sustainable processes rather than spend the same amount of money on 10 different 10 shirts as they were 6 months ago. So price will not, it won't be the, we will just consume less, therefore spend less, but buy better.
Right. Slow fashion, more of slow
Yeah.
fashion.
So that should be that should be the design philosophy a lot of these kids should now incorporate. That don't let the price be the barrier. Your story and your product sustainability story should be so good that anybody would buy it.
Right. So concentrating more on slow fashion rather than
Yes.
fast fashion that we've been following for so long.
Blindly.
Right. Yeah, excessively, blindly. Okay, a lot of them are confused looking at this scenario because fashion is going to be hit massively by this pandemic. So they really want to know, is it like a positive thing for them to go ahead and still be taking fashion as a career?
So, of course, I guess all of them are doing it primarily because they're passionate about it, right? So it's not that fashion will die; it will just reinvent itself. So they need to reinvent themselves with it. So, for example, another very interesting thing to mention here is that for all you know, within the fashion area of fashion, there'll be far more newer positions that will be and which will get developed, career options which will come out of all this pandemic. So when you talk about, for all you know, this could be a major opportunity in this time of disaster for young designers who are just passing out of college, because we could be imagine when I mentioned specifically, I imagine every company hiring a group of people who are who are trained fashion professionals but are very tech savvy. So, for example, a normal techie, right, would not have the fashion background, whereas it's very possible for a person trained in fashion to be technologically savvy. So for all you know, there might be different positions that will get created. Virtual merchandising, the 3D designing, all those things I talked about. Those are all new areas of positions that will get created where people will hire. So I think it's just about the industry getting back on its feet. It's not about feeling demoralized. And yes, we will have to reinvent. And yeah, it will be a patience game. And let's wait and watch and hope for the best.
So the next up is there any particular theme or trend that's going to dominate the next decade? Anything that we can think of, or you think?
Like I said, minimalism, comfort, casual, sustainability. Fit, very good quality, classic product.
Right. So it all boils down to slow fashion, really.
Yeah. And important pieces that people would want to buy for a reason.
Right.
Because see, one thing is clear, right? We all have enough clothes in our wardrobe without reason.
Without reason.
Right? We all have. We have enough. All of us. This pandemic has taught us all that each one of us has ample clothing. So if I was to ask you how, like when this is over, when you go out to buy something, whether you're spending 500 rupees or 5,000 rupees, you will not spend it blindly because you like a product. There will be so many other things influencing you, a lot of which
it's going to be
we've
more conscious now.
Yeah.
It's going to get more conscious now.
So that will, when you say the underlying theme is what you just said, we will shop consciously.
Right, which is very, very important to understand.
Which is where Mr. Armani said, no, we will hopefully find our soul again.
Yeah, I think these universal shifts happen only because they're supposed to be learned more. We're supposed to know ourselves more. So I think this has happened for a reason, definitely. Also, one person wants to know, when you talk about rewiring ourselves and looking at things differently, whatever we've talked about so far, is there anything that is that we can't imagine as of now, and it'll just happen as in how things get better and we move along with time? Are there going to be things that we can't really think of, we can't look at differently? Is it going to happen with time? Whatever we are thinking about
Yeah, no,
right
for
now,
example, we talked about virtual sampling. Now we are saying it's part of rewiring our system. But for if you were to ask me, I don't know how to virtually sample. I will have to create it. The first time I do it, it'll be a brand new experience for me. You know, I've done some remote design from because I used to travel a lot, where I would be sitting in Paris or London and sending a sketch to an assistant and telling him, "ये fabric में ऐसे बनाओ, वो करो." But never with the. I think that's going to become a permanent thing, and that never that I will have to design a whole collection perhaps like that. So yes, there'll be a lot of things all of us learn as we go along. So that is again a big benefit for these children. That remember that the industry will. It's not that they will be joining an industry which is established for years and follows only certain patterns that existed. So many new things will get created either by people like them who are perhaps say 1 or 2 years their seniors, or by these guys themselves, because we will all be finding out these answers when things open up and when hopefully this COVID-19 is behind us.
So they're basically going to be learning a way to learn. So they're learning new ways of learning and learning new ways of doing.
I would put it as they're going to be part of a fashion revolution. So this is not if you love fashion, this is the time to be excited about it. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but you're going to learn things which are going to go down in history, because those are things nobody has ever thought of, and people are thinking now and people are doing now.
Right.
So we have some specific students asking questions, like they have their own inclinations. Zaid from our BBA batch wants to know, and Divya from the same batch wants to know, what is the future of streetwear and ethnic wear? What is the future? How does it look like, respectively?
So, for example, streetwear, which was the biggest trend, as I mentioned even earlier in the last about 15-20 minutes ago, that streetwear will emerge into something simpler, right? There was again one big thing that was happening with streetwear was an overdose. So, for instance, I really don't know if the way people were spending $2,000 on those expensive sneakers, and large sums of money on hoodies and track pants. I'm presuming that those things will become simpler. People will not want to buy a $2,000 sweatshirt which you can wear only once. So streetwear will stay because of the fact that we will still want comfort and remain casual. So in that sense it'll stay, but I don't see that type of money being spent that was being spent in it over the last 5 years or so. What was the second part of the question?
Sir, the future of street. Yeah,
ethnic wear.
Ethnic wear, we will, like I said, majority of our ethnic wear was consumed over the big fat Indian wedding. Now, since we don't know how that's going to evolve, and whether weddings will be restricted to 20 people, again, will people want to dress quite elegantly and simply there? Will again people go back to perhaps even sustainable ways there? For instance, wearing your mother's lehenga, wearing traditional Kanjivaram saris. Time will tell. So yes, there's in the ethnic space there will definitely be some movement. For example, will you feel consciously responsible enough to go and spend so many lakhs on a lehenga for a wedding that has 20 people or 50 people? We don't know. So I see a major shift in that area.
We'll also probably see the shift in the consumer's mindset also.
Yes.
So they will be acceptable to sustainable products.
Correct.
They will be conscious as well.
Where girls might end up saying, "Mom, I'd like to wear your wedding sari at my wedding," or please buy me a new Kanjivaram or something of that sort, or especially woven sari in Banaras that I would like to wear, So those kind of shifts.
And then made nicely, made for the modern aesthetic.
Yeah.
So very much.
Yeah.
So I have this one final question. It's almost about time for a lot of these students in our current batches who are about to go, they're about to join industry with their jobs. So they want to know, what is a better decision to go ahead, be with the designer, export house, buying houses, or start your own label? What do you think is the best option as of now?
I think that starting a new label immediately in the next 6 months would be a little tricky, because the industry will need to find its ground again, right? They need to go out there and look at job opportunities that get created once the fashion industry knows, whether once we found a vaccine or not, how are consumer trends shaping up, so many things we discussed, are they panning out that way? Because if they do pan out that way, people will be hired for those places, right? I might be a company where I only employ very flamboyant 5 designers. But if the whole shift is towards simple, casual, minimalist clothing, I need to hire somebody who can help me with that, right? So the next 6 months will determine how the industry phases through these difficult times. So my advice would definitely be that first try and get a job within the industry. It is a very interesting time to learn. All times of crisis, there are opportunities there. So let's learn from those let's learn from those opportunities. And then once things have settled and the dust has settled, you yourselves would be armed with so much information which you could then apply to launching your own label.
So launching your own label is also not something that everybody would probably want to do. So it would also be
See, conventional selling tools, conventional marketing tools, conventional communication tools will all have changed. So, for example, if you were to ask me, how do you launch a label right now? I don't know, right?
correct.
Because that was what we've discussed over the last 2 hours, that the way we sell, the way we make, the way we communicate, all is going to change. So unless all of us start seeing those changes, for example, you start getting those emails from brands, or video conferencing with stores, or virtual walkthroughs, you don't even know how brands are going to sell. We don't even know whether we're going to walk into a mall again. So those are options that need to be put on hold till we know how the industry is going to, what is the new for the industry.
New normal.
That is what we have to wait for.
What the new normal is.
That's right. Which is where perhaps when we talked about luxury must hibernate, another way of looking at that is we all need to go on pause and keep our minds ticking, but think of all these solutions and then collectively share data and move forward.
So this is also about bringing the industry together. So there is no rivals around anymore. So everybody will have to work together and not take each other as your business rivals. And
well, hopefully, yes. So
time to live together happily.
Yeah, those are things that happen in times of crisis, right? So yet to see whether, I hope it happens in our industry, but it will need to happen for at least for the players who get along with each other, because sharing data, as I said, will be the people who will see themselves at the other end of the tunnel.
Right.
Right, Vash?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any more questions?
I think this is pretty much it for now, sir.
Okay.
I think we're good for now.
Okay.
Well,
so no more questions.
Well, I think it was a fantastic discussion. Very, very enlightening. And of course, as many doors it has closed, it has opened also a lot of new doors.
That's right.
in a different direction, and in some ways, and I think we're just round the corner where we will see a lot of new exciting things will happen, perhaps in a somewhat different way. So from that point of view, and as I say, the fashion will always live on. You know, like food always will live on. Food, shelter, and fashion. I'm not saying clothing because we have gone beyond clothing. And fashion is really comes from the mind. It doesn't come from the body. So
Yeah,
no matter how technology develops and all that, fashion will always be a part. Will always be there. It's never be. It will never go away like some of the products have in the past or
agreed.
other things. So with that good note, I'd like to thank you um, for coming, sharing your thoughts and ideas, and I hope it inspires a lot of our students and others to really look on.
It was my
Gulbash? Yeah,
absolute pleasure. I enjoyed it very much.
good. Thank you.
Thank
Gulbash?
you, guys.
Thank you so much, Ashish. You have always been that spark with the students, and they all love listening to you. And I'm sure so do all of us always. And we always like to sit around when you talk. It's always very nice to listen to you. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for taking time out. And we will
I'd
take
like to
that
take
thing
1 minute,
on that we will take up
which
a session with everybody. Yes, sir.
one thought I wanted to take on, it just clicked again. What Ashish was talking about, since things are changing, we need to brainstorm among designers and others, stakeholders, let me put it that way, on coming out with new creative ideas on how fashion should move forward and what are the different ways that things can be put together. And since Ashish is a very strong pillar in whether it's the FTCI or other colleagues, perhaps you can be the catalyst and bring together people, perhaps on Zoom itself. Yeah,
Yeah,
industry people. Yeah,
yeah, that could be done.
yeah.
Sure, I'm happy. I'd be happy to work on
It
that.
will be a good, some of these students who really have their thought processes in time. Yeah, so let's just do that also. It sounds good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that because a lot of the ideas will come from them.
Right. Right.
I'm sure.
Lovely. Thank you
Anyways,
very
thank
much.
you so much, Ashish. Thank you,
Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
sir, to be around. And thank you, Kriti ma'am.
Thank
And
you, sir.
thank you, Vani ma'am, for attending this also, to being around with us. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.